Before we dive in, remember, what you're about to hear is a dramatic, fictionalized story created purely for entertainment, inspired by the over-the-top style of reality TV drama. Listen closely, because the night everything exploded started with a single sound that no one in that house will ever forget. It was the sharp crack of a slap, echoing through the walls like a gunshot. In that split second, time froze. Fans are shocked to even imagine it, but inside that once luxurious home, emotions ran high, tempers boiled over, and years of buried resentment finally came crashing out into the open. What was supposed to be a private family argument turned into a full-blown war, one that would leave a father humiliated, a son enraged, and a family completely torn apart. Witnesses say Chrissy stood frozen, her hand trembling, her face burning with disbelief. No one expected things to go that far. Not the friends in the next room. Not the neighbors who would soon hear shouting spill out into the night. And certainly not the son, who rushed in just moments later, eyes blazing, fists clenched, only to see a scene that would change his relationship with his father forever. You've heard rumors before. You've seen messy celebrity arguments play out online. But this was different. This wasn't about fame or money, this was about respect, control, and a long history of pain that had never healed. As voices rose and accusations flew, the house transformed from a symbol of success into a battlefield of broken trust. "What did you just do?" the son allegedly screamed, stepping between them. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your chest feel tight just listening to it. Chrissy was crying, Jim was shouting, and the son? He was done staying silent. Fans are shocked because what happened next wasn't just yelling. It wasn't just threats. It was physical. It was raw. It was the kind of moment families never recover from. In a twist no one saw coming, the son snapped, retaliating in defense, unleashing years of anger in a matter of seconds. By the end of it, the unthinkable had happened. The man who once ruled that house was being dragged to the door and told to leave. Kicked out, by his own blood. As word of the incident spread, reactions poured in. Some sided with the son. Others claimed lines should never be crossed. Friends took sides. The family was left divided. And the biggest question of all hung heavy in the air, was this the end of everything they had built, or just the beginning of an even darker chapter? Stay with us, because this story only gets more intense from here. The night didn't begin with shouting. It began with silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears so hard it feels louder than any scream. Chrissy stood near the kitchen counter, her arms folded tight across her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Jim paced back and forth across the living room, his footsteps heavy, impatient, deliberate. Every step felt like a warning. Years of unresolved tension hung between them, thick as smoke, and both of them knew this conversation was long overdue. Jim broke the silence first. His voice was sharp, edged with frustration that had clearly been building for weeks, maybe months. He accused Chrissy of disrespect, of talking back, of embarrassing him in front of others earlier that evening. Chrissy fired back, her voice shaking but firm, saying she was tired of being spoken to like a child, tired of swallowing her feelings just to keep the peace. Emotions ran high as each sentence uncovered another buried wound. What started as a disagreement quickly spiraled into something darker, something personal. The argument drifted from the kitchen into the living room, voices rising with every step. Jim's face turned red as he brought up sacrifices he claimed to have made, reminding everyone in that house who paid the bills, who built the life they were living. Chrissy's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to back down. She reminded him that money didn't give him the right to control people or crush them emotionally. Fans would later be shocked to hear just how raw and ugly the exchange became. At one point, Chrissy tried to walk away. She turned toward the hallway, saying she needed space, saying she didn't want this to get out of hand. That was when Jim snapped. Witnesses would later say his tone changed completely, dropping into something cold and dangerous. He told her she wasn't going anywhere until he finished speaking. The room seemed to close in on them, the walls absorbing every word, every insult, every accusation. Chrissy turned back around, her hands trembling. She told him she was done being afraid, done being quiet. She said the words she had held in for years, accusing him of emotional abuse, of intimidation, of making the house feel like a prison instead of a home. Those words hit Jim like gasoline on a fire. His jaw clenched, his eyes darkened, and for a moment, no one breathed. Then it happened. The slap came fast and loud, the sound cracking through the room like thunder. Chrissy staggered back, her hand flying to her face, shock written across every feature. Time seemed to freeze. Even Jim looked momentarily stunned by what he had done, as if the reality of his action hadn't fully registered yet. But before anyone could say a word, before Chrissy could even scream, footsteps thundered down the hallway. His son burst into the room. He had heard the shouting from upstairs, had tried to ignore it at first, hoping it would burn itself out like so many arguments before. But the sound of that slap changed everything. His heart pounded as he took in the scene, Chrissy crying, Jim standing rigid, his hand still raised. Rage flooded through him so quickly it felt like his chest might explode. He demanded to know what happened, his voice shaking with fury. Chrissy couldn't even speak at first. She just looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Jim tried to explain, tried to justify his actions, saying she had pushed him too far, saying he had been disrespected in his own house. Those words only made things worse. The son stepped forward, placing himself between them, his entire body tense. He told Jim he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He reminded him that no argument, no amount of anger, ever justified laying hands on someone. Jim shot back that this was none of his business, that he was the parent and this was his house. That sentence landed like a challenge. The son laughed bitterly, shaking his head, saying respect was earned, not demanded. Voices echoed through the house as the confrontation escalated. Accusations flew from every direction. The son brought up past incidents, moments he had witnessed growing up, times when anger had ruled instead of love. Chrissy watched in silence, torn between fear and relief that someone was finally standing up for her. The air felt electric, like something was about to explode. Jim took a step forward, invading his son's space, telling him to back off. That was the moment everything snapped. The son shoved him back, hard enough that Jim stumbled. Gasps filled the room. What followed was chaos. Yelling, struggling, furniture scraping against the floor. Emotions ran high as years of resentment poured out in a matter of seconds. The son didn't see his father anymore. All he saw was the man who had hurt someone he cared about, the man who had ruled the household through fear. Fueled by adrenaline and anger, he struck back, not once but multiple times, shouting for him to stop, to leave, to never do that again. Chrissy screamed for them to stop, her voice breaking, but neither of them seemed to hear her. When it was over, Jim lay against the wall, breathing heavily, his pride shattered along with the illusion of control he had clung to for so long. The son stood over him, chest heaving, hands shaking as the weight of what he had done began to sink in. The room was a mess, physically and emotionally. Nothing would ever be the same again. The son pointed toward the front door. His voice was low, but every word carried power. He told Jim to get out. He said this house was no longer a place where violence was tolerated. Jim tried to protest, tried to remind him again whose name was on the deed, but the son cut him off. He said none of that mattered anymore. The damage had already been done. Chrissy watched as Jim slowly stood, his face a mix of disbelief and humiliation. He grabbed his jacket, casting one last look around the room, a look that suggested betrayal more than remorse. As he walked toward the door, the silence returned, heavier than before. The door slammed shut behind him, echoing through the house like the final note of a song no one wanted to hear. Outside, Jim stood alone, stunned, while inside, Chrissy collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. The son knelt beside her, apologizing over and over, promising her she was safe now. But even as he spoke those words, he knew the consequences of this night were only beginning to unfold. The family was left divided, the lines drawn in a way that could never be erased. And as the house settled into an uneasy quiet, one thing was painfully clear. This wasn't just an argument. This was the beginning of a fallout that would shock everyone watching from the outside, and destroy everything they thought they knew about this family. The door had barely stopped rattling when the weight of reality settled in. The son stood frozen for a moment, staring at the space where his father had been, his mind racing faster than his heart. Chrissy's sobs filled the room, raw and uncontrollable, cutting through the silence like broken glass. He turned to her immediately, kneeling, asking over and over if she was okay, if she was hurt, if she needed anything. She nodded faintly, but her eyes told a different story. This wasn't just pain from a slap. This was years of fear finally spilling out. Neighbors had already begun to stir. Porch lights flicked on outside, shadows moving behind curtains. Someone must have heard the shouting. Someone always does. Inside, the son helped Chrissy to her feet and guided her to the couch. His hands were still shaking, adrenaline refusing to fade. He kept replaying the moment in his head, the sound of that slap, the look on her face, the rage that followed. Fans would later be shocked to hear just how close this night came to something even worse. Chrissy tried to speak, tried to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered that she never wanted things to go this far. She said she had been trying to protect the family, to keep everything together, even if it meant losing pieces of herself. The son listened, jaw clenched, realizing how much had been hidden from him. He felt guilt crash over him like a wave, guilt for not stepping in sooner, for not asking harder questions. Minutes passed, then an hour. The house felt unfamiliar, like a stage after the actors have left. Every creak of the floorboards made them jump. The son kept checking his phone, half expecting messages from relatives, friends, anyone who might have already heard. But the silence stretched on, heavy and uneasy. Outside, Jim sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Humiliation burned hotter than anger now. Being thrown out by his own son was something he never imagined. He told himself he had been provoked, that he had lost control because of disrespect. But even as he rehearsed excuses in his mind, doubt crept in. The image of Chrissy's face after the slap replayed over and over, refusing to fade. He made a call, then another. Close friends, allies, people he knew would listen to his side. His voice trembled as he spoke, painting himself as the victim, claiming betrayal, claiming he had been attacked in his own home. Emotions ran high as he promised this wasn't over, that he wouldn't be erased so easily. The narrative was already forming, even before the night had fully ended. Back inside, Chrissy finally fell asleep on the couch, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline. The son covered her with a blanket and sat nearby, staring into the darkness. His phone buzzed. A text from a cousin. Then another from an old family friend. Word was spreading faster than he expected. Questions poured in. What happened? Is it true? Is everyone okay? The family was left divided before the sun even rose. By morning, tension hung in the air like fog. Chrissy woke with a headache and swollen eyes, unsure for a moment where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The slap, the shouting, the door slamming. She sat up slowly, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that Jim wasn't there. Dread of what would come next. The son made coffee, moving through the kitchen like a ghost. Neither of them spoke much. There were no words that could fix what had been broken. Eventually, Chrissy asked the question both of them had been avoiding. What happens now? He didn't have an answer. Legally, financially, emotionally, everything was tangled. Jim might have been gone, but his presence still loomed over the house. Later that day, Jim returned, not to the house, but to the story. Calls were made. Selective details were shared. He told people he had been ambushed, disrespected, attacked by his own son. He left out the slap. He left out the years of tension. Fans would later be shocked at how quickly sides were taken based on half-truths and whispered accusations. The son began receiving messages too. Some supportive, praising him for standing up. Others angry, accusing him of betrayal, of violence, of disrespecting his father. Every notification felt like another punch to the chest. He tried to focus on Chrissy, on making sure she felt safe, but the noise from the outside world kept creeping in. By evening, the family group chat exploded. Uncles, aunts, siblings, everyone weighing in. Some demanded apologies. Others demanded explanations. The son typed and deleted responses, unsure how much truth to reveal. Chrissy read the messages quietly, tears welling up again as she realized how alone she truly was. Even now, even after everything, people questioned her pain. That night, the son couldn't sleep. He sat at the dining table, staring at old family photos on the wall. Smiling faces, birthdays, holidays, moments that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. He wondered if those smiles had ever been real, or if they had always been hiding cracks beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Jim stayed with a friend, pacing, replaying his own version of events. Anger simmered beneath his calm exterior. He convinced himself he had been wronged, that respect had been stolen from him. He began planning his next move, thinking about lawyers, about statements, about control. The idea of losing everything terrified him more than losing his family. By the next morning, whispers had turned into rumors. People talked. People speculated. Fans were shocked by leaked details, by anonymous posts hinting at a violent family meltdown. No names were confirmed yet, but the story had a life of its own. And at the center of it all was a family trying to survive the fallout of one explosive night. The son looked at Chrissy across the table and made a quiet promise. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't let her face it alone. But even as he said it, he knew the road ahead would be brutal. Because when private pain becomes public drama, there are no easy endings, only deeper scars waiting to be uncovered. The third day after the incident felt heavier than the first two combined. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by something far more dangerous, interpretation. Everyone now had a version of what happened, and none of them fully matched. Chrissy woke up that morning to dozens of missed calls she hadn't had the strength to answer. Some were from relatives who suddenly wanted to check in. Others were from people who clearly wanted details, confirmation, something they could pass along. She stared at the phone, her hands cold, her stomach tight. The son noticed the change immediately. The quiet support of the first night had shifted into something tense and uncertain. Chrissy moved slower, spoke less. The safety she had felt after Jim left was now being invaded by fear of what came next. Not fear of him returning physically, but fear of being rewritten in other people's stories. She finally said it out loud while standing in the kitchen, her voice barely above a whisper. She said she felt like she was about to be put on trial. By midday, Jim made his first direct move. A message arrived, not to Chrissy, but to the son. It was long, carefully written, and full of controlled language. He accused the son of violence, of betrayal, of turning the family against him. He demanded an apology. He demanded access to the house. He demanded respect. The son read it twice, then a third time, feeling anger rise with every sentence. There was no mention of the slap. No acknowledgement of Chrissy's pain. Just demands. The son didn't respond right away. He showed the message to Chrissy, watching her reaction closely. Her face hardened, something changing behind her eyes. She said quietly that this was exactly what she had feared. Not remorse. Not accountability. Just control dressed up as wounded pride. Emotions ran high as the son finally typed a reply, telling Jim he wasn't welcome back until real accountability happened. That the house needed peace, not intimidation. Jim's response came fast. Too fast. It was colder now. He said he would not be locked out of his own life. He said lawyers would get involved if necessary. He said lies had consequences. The words felt like a threat, even if they were wrapped in formality. The son put the phone down, his hands shaking again, realizing this fight was far from over. That afternoon, the first public crack appeared. A vague post surfaced online, shared by someone close to Jim. It didn't name names, but it spoke of betrayal by family, of being attacked and humiliated, of loyalty being thrown away. Fans were shocked at how quickly speculation ignited. Comments flooded in, people guessing, people choosing sides, people adding their own dramatic interpretations. The family was left divided not just privately, but publicly. Chrissy saw the post late that evening. She didn't cry this time. Instead, she went very still. She said it felt like being erased in real time, like watching someone else narrate her pain while she was still bleeding from it. The son tried to reassure her, telling her the truth would matter in the end. But even as he said it, he wondered if that was still true in a world that thrived on drama over facts. The next day brought more fallout. An aunt showed up unannounced, claiming she just wanted to help. Her tone was gentle, but her questions were sharp. Had Chrissy said something to provoke him? Was the slap really that serious? Could it have been exaggerated? The son felt his temper flare, stepping in before Chrissy could even respond. He told his aunt the visit was over. She left offended, muttering about respect and family loyalty. After she left, Chrissy broke down again, this time in anger. She said she was tired of being asked to soften the truth so others could stay comfortable. She said she had spent years minimizing herself to keep the family intact, and she refused to do it anymore. The son listened, realizing how deep the damage ran, how much this moment had unlocked. Meanwhile, Jim's circle grew louder. Friends defended him fiercely, dismissing the incident as a misunderstanding, a moment taken out of context. Some said the son had always been rebellious. Others hinted that Chrissy had manipulated the situation. Rumors twisted and multiplied, each one further from the truth. Fans were shocked at how ugly the narrative became, how quickly sympathy shifted based on who spoke loudest. Legal language began creeping into conversations. Jim's lawyer reached out, requesting a formal statement. The son's chest tightened reading the email. This was no longer just a family matter. It was becoming something colder, more strategic. Chrissy felt sick when she heard. She said she never wanted it to turn into this. She had only wanted the yelling to stop. She had only wanted to feel safe. Late one night, unable to sleep, the son sat alone in the living room, staring at the door. He wondered if he had gone too far, if defending someone he loved would cost him everything else. Then he remembered the sound of the slap, the look on Chrissy's face. The doubt faded. Some lines, once crossed, demand a response no matter the cost. A message arrived just before dawn. It was from Jim. Shorter this time, colder. He said if they wanted war, they would get it. The son exhaled slowly, the weight of that sentence settling deep in his chest. Upstairs, Chrissy slept fitfully, unaware of the latest escalation. By morning, the situation had fully transformed. What began as a private explosion had become a public storm. Trust was shattered, alliances were forming, and everyone involved could feel it building towards something even bigger. Because when pride replaces accountability and control replaces love, the damage doesn't fade quietly. It grows louder, and this family was standing right at the edge of that storm, with no clear way out. By the fourth week, the house no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a bunker. Curtains stayed closed, doors stayed locked. Every knock, every unexpected sound sent a jolt of anxiety through Chrissy's body. She jumped at notifications now, her phone a constant reminder that the world outside hadn't forgotten. If anything, it was circling closer. The son tried to keep things normal. He cooked, he cleaned, he made jokes that didn't quite land. But beneath it all, the tension was relentless. Both of them knew something bigger was coming. Jim had gone quiet again, and that silence was more terrifying than his anger. Silence meant planning. Then it started. A second post surfaced online, this one longer, more detailed, and clearly intentional. It spoke of betrayal by a child, of being physically attacked, of losing everything overnight. It painted a picture of a man destroyed by the people he loved most. Once again, there was no mention of the slap. No mention of Chrissy's tears. Fans were shocked by how convincing it sounded. Sympathy poured in. Support messages multiplied. The narrative was hardening. Chrissy read the comments until her hands shook. Strangers dissected her character without ever knowing her. Some called her manipulative. Others called her a liar. A few even said she deserved what happened. She dropped the phone like it burned her and broke down, sobbing harder than she had since that first night. The son held her, feeling helpless rage claw at his chest. He decided then that staying silent was no longer an option. Against Chrissy's initial fear, he recorded a private statement. Not for the public yet, but for protection. He spoke calmly, recounting exactly what he saw, exactly what he heard. He described the slap in detail, the sound, the shock, the way Chrissy froze. He saved the file in multiple places. It felt wrong, turning trauma into evidence, but survival demanded it. The next blow came from inside the family. A formal letter arrived, delivered by courier. Legal language, cold, distant. It accused the son of assault and demanded he vacate the property immediately. Chrissy felt dizzy reading it. The house she had finally felt safe in was now being threatened. The son read the letter twice, then crumpled it slowly, his jaw tight. This was it. Jim wasn't just rewriting the story. He was trying to erase them. Emotions ran high that night. Chrissy screamed for the first time since it all began. She screamed about fear, about control, about how even now Jim was still reaching into her life, trying to dominate from a distance. She said she felt hunted. The son listened, then made a decision that would change everything. They would not leave quietly. The next morning, a lawyer was contacted. Then another. Options were laid out, timelines discussed, risks calculated. Chrissy hated every second of it. She never wanted to be strategic about pain. But the reality was brutal. If they didn't speak up, they would be buried under someone else's version of events. Then came the leak. Someone close to the family, no one ever admitted who, shared a distorted version of the incident with a popular gossip page. The story exploded overnight. Headlines screamed betrayal. Fans were shocked. Speculation turned vicious. Names weren't confirmed, but clues were obvious. The internet did what it always does when it smells blood. Chrissy stopped leaving the house altogether. The son watched her shrink day by day, the weight of public judgment crushing her spirit. He saw the same fear in her eyes that he had seen growing up during Jim's worst moments. And that realization broke something inside him. This wasn't just about one night. It never had been. It was about a pattern that refused to die unless someone finally stood in its way. Jim, meanwhile, was thriving on the attention. Interviews were quietly arranged. Off-the-record conversations happened. He was calm, composed, wounded but dignified. The performance was flawless. Friends praised his restraint. Supporters called him strong. The version of Jim the world saw bore no resemblance to the man from that night. One evening, as rain hammered against the windows, Chrissy asked the question that terrified them both. What if no one believes me? The son didn't answer right away. He wanted to promise her justice, clarity, truth. But promises felt fragile now. Instead, he told her something else. He told her belief didn't start with the world. It started with her refusing to doubt herself. That night, she opened her laptop and began to write. Not a statement, not a defense. A story. Her story. Every moment she had swallowed. Every time she had been told she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. Words poured out of her like blood from an open wound. She didn't know if she would ever share it. But writing it made something inside her stand back up. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, two people prepared themselves for the moment the truth would finally collide with a lie that had grown too big to ignore. The fifth phase didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with resolve. Something had shifted inside Chrissy, subtle but powerful, like the quiet moment before a storm turns direction. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. Instead, there was clarity. A painful kind of clarity that comes only after you've lost the illusion that staying silent will keep you safe. She finished writing her story just before sunrise. When she closed the laptop, her hands were steady. She didn't feel relief. She felt prepared. The sun noticed the change immediately. She stood straighter. Her voice no longer cracked when Jim's name came up. When another rumor surfaced that morning, she didn't flinch. She simply said they were running out of time to control the narrative. Emotions ran high as they both realized the same truth at once. If they didn't speak now, they would spend the rest of their lives reacting instead of living. That afternoon, a meeting took place with their lawyer. This time, Chrissy spoke first. She explained everything, from the earliest signs of control to the final slap. She didn't rush. She didn't soften anything. The room went quiet as she described moments she had never said out loud. The lawyer listened carefully, then nodded. There was a long road ahead, but for the first time, Chrissy felt seen. Meanwhile, Jim sensed the shift too. His calls went unanswered. His messages remained unread. The silence irritated him. He wasn't used to losing access. He escalated again, releasing another carefully worded statement through intermediaries, suggesting reconciliation if apologies were made. Fans were shocked by the sudden tone change. Some praised his willingness to heal. Others suspected manipulation. The family was left divided yet again. The son read the statement with a hollow expression. Reconciliation without accountability wasn't healing. It was erasure. He deleted the message without replying. Pressure mounted from all sides. Relatives begged for peace. Friends urged discretion. Chrissy was told repeatedly that speaking out would only make things worse. She listened politely, then ignored the advice. She had spent too many years making herself smaller for other people's comfort. She refused to do it again. The breaking point came when a private detail from her writing appeared online, twisted and weaponized. Only a handful of people had access to that information. Betrayal hit hard. Chrissy locked herself in the bathroom, shaking, her breath shallow. The son sat outside the door, reminding her she wasn't alone, reminding her that fear thrived in isolation. When she finally came out, her decision was made. She would speak publicly. Not through gossip pages. Not through leaks. Directly. Preparations moved fast. Statements were reviewed. Timelines confirmed. Evidence organized. Chrissy rehearsed her words, not to sound perfect, but to stay grounded. The son stood by her side through every step, shielding her from unnecessary noise, filtering messages, absorbing anger that wasn't his to carry. Jim reacted exactly as expected. Before Chrissy could speak, he launched preemptively. Accusations intensified. His circle went into overdrive, warning of lies, manipulation, revenge. The tone sharpened. Threats became less subtle. Emotions ran high as the conflict reached a point of no return. The night before Chrissy's statement, she barely slept. Doubt crept in during the quiet hours. What if this destroyed her? What if it didn't change anything? The son sat with her on the floor of the living room, the same room where everything had fallen apart weeks earlier. He reminded her that the goal wasn't control. It was truth. Morning came heavy and gray. Chrissy released her statement without fanfare. No dramatic music. No sensational framing. Just her words. Calm. Clear. Unflinching. She described the slap. The fear. The years of emotional control. She didn't insult Jim. She didn't speculate. She simply told what happened. The response was immediate. Fans were shocked. Some expressed support instantly, apologizing for doubting her. Others accused her of exaggeration, of timing, of betrayal. The internet split down the middle, louder than ever. But something crucial had changed. The lie no longer stood alone. It had a shadow now. A challenge. Jim's reaction was explosive. He denied everything. Doubled down. Accused Chrissy of destroying the family. Accused the son of poisoning her mind. His statements grew erratic, anger seeping through the polished language. Supporters noticed the shift. Cracks began to show. Private messages leaked. Inconsistencies surfaced. Timelines didn't line up. People started asking questions Jim hadn't prepared for. The control he once held so effortlessly began to slip. Inside the house, Chrissy sat quietly after releasing the statement, her phone face down. She felt drained, exposed, but strangely lighter. The son hugged her, both of them knowing there was no turning back now. That night, for the first time in weeks, the house was quiet without being heavy. But the fallout wasn't over. Because when truth finally speaks, it doesn't end the story. It forces the ending to reveal itself. The final stretch didn't arrive like closure. It arrived like aftermath, slow, heavy, and impossible to ignore. The days following Chrissy's statement blurred together, each one marked by new reactions, new revelations, new fractures forming where denial once lived. The noise outside grew louder, but inside the house something unexpected happened. Steadiness. Chrissy no longer checked her phone every minute. She still read messages, still absorbed the weight of public opinion, but it no longer defined her breathing. The fear that once sat in her chest had transformed into something else. Resolve. She had said what needed to be said. Whatever came next would come. The son watched this transformation quietly. He had spent years believing strength meant confrontation, meant standing in front of danger with clenched fists. Now he saw another kind of strength. The kind that spoke plainly and refused to bend. It humbled him. Jim, on the other hand, was unraveling. His statements grew longer, less controlled. He contradicted himself without realizing it. One day he claimed nothing physical ever happened. The next, he admitted to losing his temper but insisted it was provoked. Supporters began to splinter. Some still defended him fiercely, but others pulled away, uneasy with the shifting story. Fans were shocked by how quickly certainty turned into doubt. Behind the scenes, legal pressure mounted. Timelines were requested. Witnesses were contacted. People who had once stayed quiet now hesitated less. A former friend confirmed hearing shouting that night. A neighbor admitted to hearing a scream. None of it was explosive on its own, but together it formed a pattern Jim could no longer dismiss. The family fallout was brutal. Holidays were cancelled. Invitations went unanswered. Siblings stopped speaking. Chrissy watched relationships crumble with a strange mix of grief and acceptance. She had already mourned the version of family that required her silence. What remained was painful, but honest. One afternoon, a message arrived from someone unexpected. Jim's sister. The tone was different from everyone else's. No accusations, no demands, just an apology. She admitted she hadn't wanted to believe it at first. Admitting the truth meant admitting how much she had ignored over the years. Chrissy read the message twice, then cried quietly. Not because it fixed anything, but because it acknowledged reality. The son saw that moment as a turning point. Belief was spreading, not loudly, not unanimously, but steadily. And that was enough. Jim tried one last move. He requested a private meeting. No lawyers. No statements, just family. The son refused immediately. Chrissy hesitated. Part of her wanted answers. Part of her wanted confirmation that she hadn't imagined everything. But deeper than that was instinct. The same instinct that had warned her for years. She declined. Jim reacted with fury. A final outburst online followed, angrier than anything before. Insults slipped through. Bitterness replaced dignity. And with that, something important shifted publicly. Even longtime supporters began distancing themselves. The image Jim had worked so hard to maintain collapsed under the weight of his own words. After that, the noise slowly began to fade. Not disappear, fade. New stories replaced old ones. Attention drifted. Outrage found another target. But for Chrissy and the son, life didn't simply return to normal. It rebuilt itself differently. Chrissy began therapy. Real therapy. Not damage control. Healing. She spoke about control, about fear, about how easy it is to lose yourself when survival becomes the goal. Some days were harder than others. Some nights the memories still came. But she no longer faced them alone. The son changed too. He became more patient, more deliberate. He learned to sit with discomfort instead of charging at it. He learned that protecting someone didn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it meant listening. Sometimes it meant believing without needing proof. Months passed. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the trees, Chrissy spoke a truth she hadn't said out loud before. She said she didn't hate Jim. The son looked at her, surprised. She explained that hate kept her tied to the past. Understanding didn't excuse what happened, but it freed her from carrying his anger any longer. The son nodded. He understood. Jim faded into distance. Not forgiven. Not forgotten. Just no longer central. The power he once held over their lives dissolved when attention stopped feeding it. Consequences arrived quietly. Strained finances. Lost allies. Isolation. No dramatic ending. Just reality. And that, more than anything, was the truth Jim had tried to outrun. The house changed too. Laughter returned slowly. Music played again. Windows opened. Chrissy rearranged the furniture, not to erase the past, but to reclaim the space. Every small change felt like a declaration. This is mine now. One night, long after the worst had passed, Chrissy thanked the son again. He told her she didn't owe him gratitude. Standing up had been a choice. Loving someone meant choosing them even when it was costly. The family would never be whole in the way it once pretended to be. But it was honest now. And honesty, they learned, was safer than silence ever had been. The story didn't end with reconciliation. It ended with truth taking up space. And sometimes, that's the most powerful ending of all. Time passed in uneven waves after everything settled, not the gentle kind but the kind that pull you under when you least expect it. Chrissy learned that healing wasn't linear. Some mornings she woke up light, almost hopeful, convinced she had finally stepped out of the shadow that had followed her for years. Other mornings, a sound, a phrase, even the way sunlight hit the wall would drag her right back to that night. The slap echoed in memory not as noise but as a feeling. Sudden, violating, impossible to ignore. The son watched her closely but didn't hover. He had learned that support didn't always mean fixing. Sometimes it meant letting silence exist without rushing to fill it. They built a new rhythm together. Quiet breakfasts, long walks, evenings where the television stayed off and conversations drifted wherever they needed to go. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Outside their bubble, the world continued to process what had happened. Think pieces appeared. Anonymous sources vanished as quickly as they arrived. Fans were shocked at how fast outrage burned out and moved on, leaving behind the people who actually lived with the consequences. Chrissy noticed something unsettling in that realization. Public opinion had never been about truth. It had always been about consumption. Jim attempted a quiet return to normalcy. No apologies, no acknowledgements, just distance. He stopped speaking publicly, stopped posting, stopped responding. Some assumed it was dignity. Others suspected strategy. Chrissy didn't speculate anymore. She had learned that understanding his motives wouldn't heal her. Only boundaries would. Months later, a chance encounter nearly unraveled her. It happened in a grocery store. An ordinary place, an ordinary afternoon. She turned a corner and saw someone who looked just like him. The same posture, the same walk, her breath caught in her throat, panic flooding her system before logic could intervene. The son noticed immediately, guiding her outside, grounding her with steady words. She laughed afterward, embarrassed, but the fear lingered. Trauma didn't need reality to be real. That night, she admitted something she had been afraid to say. She was scared that this would always be part of her. That no matter how far she moved forward, some version of that night would follow. The son didn't contradict her. Instead, he told her the truth as he understood it. Scars don't disappear, they just stop bleeding. And sometimes, they remind you of how strong you had to be to survive. She carried those words with her. Gradually, Chrissy began reclaiming parts of herself she hadn't realized she had lost. She returned to hobbies she once loved but had abandoned because they were deemed impractical or pointless. She laughed louder. She took up space in rooms without apologizing. Each small act felt rebellious, like rewriting rules that had never been fair to begin with. The son faced his own reckoning. Protecting Chrissy had forced him to confront his childhood with fresh eyes. Memories resurfaced, moments he had normalized, excused, or buried. Anger visited him in unexpected ways. Not explosive, but heavy. He entered therapy too, learning that breaking cycles required understanding them, not just resisting them. One session left him shaken. He realized how deeply he had internalized the idea that love came with volatility. That safety was conditional, that respect had to be fought for. Unlearning those lessons was harder than learning them had ever been. They talked about it that night, sitting on the floor with their backs against the couch. Chrissy listened as he spoke openly about things he had never said out loud. For the first time, their pain felt shared, not overlapping but connected. Two stories shaped by the same force, finally allowed to be honest. As seasons changed, so did their sense of home. They moved, not far, but far enough. The old house held too many echoes. The new place was smaller, quieter, neutral. A blank page. Chrissy chose paint colors. The son assembled furniture. They argued over small things, laughed about them later. Normal arguments. Safe ones. News of Jim arrived occasionally, usually through others. Updates delivered without emotion. Chrissy listened politely, then changed the subject. She had learned that closure didn't require confrontation. Sometimes it came from indifference. One evening, long after the storm had passed, the son asked Chrissy if she ever wished things had ended differently. She thought about it for a long time. She said she wished the slap had never happened. She wished the anger had never escalated. But she didn't wish for silence anymore. Silence had nearly destroyed her. That was the truth that stayed. The family remained fractured. Some relationships never recovered. Others evolved into something quieter, more honest. There were no big reunions. No dramatic reconciliations. Just acceptance of what was and what would never be again. And yet, life went on. Chrissy smiled more. Genuinely, not performative smiles meant to keep peace, but real ones that reached her eyes. She slept better. She trusted her instincts again. That alone felt like a victory. The son found purpose in the aftermath. Not in telling the story, but in ensuring it never repeated. He became intentional about the way he spoke, the way he listened, the way he responded to conflict. He understood now that strength without empathy was just another form of control. The night that changed everything no longer defined them, but it had shaped them. It stood behind them like a marker, a reminder of where they refused to return. And in that quiet understanding, in the ordinary days that followed extraordinary pain, they found something unexpected. Peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Now it's your turn. You've heard every painful moment, every explosive argument, every twisted version of the truth, and every step toward healing. This story wasn't easy to tell, and it definitely wasn't easy to hear. Emotions ran high from beginning to end, and the family was left divided in ways that may never fully heal. But the biggest question still hangs in the air, and it belongs to you. Who do you believe crossed the line first? Was the damage already done long before that slap? Did the son do the right thing by standing up, or did he go too far? And most importantly, can a family ever truly recover after something like this? Fans are shocked by how quickly love can turn into control, and how silence can be more dangerous than shouting. This story forces you to look at loyalty, respect, and where the line really is when family conflict turns physical. Maybe you've seen something like this in your own life. Maybe you've lived through it. Or maybe this story opened your eyes to something you never noticed before. We want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't hold back. Tell us whose side you're on, or if you think there are no sides at all. Tell us what you would have done if you were in that house that night. Your voice matters here, and this conversation doesn't end when the video does. If this story kept you listening, if it made you feel something, if it made you question anything at all, make sure you hit the like button. It helps this story reach more people who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We bring you intense, emotional, reality-style stories that dive deep into family drama, betrayal, and the moments that change lives forever. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when a new story drops, because the next one might be even more shocking than this. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Take a breath, reflect, and remember, sometimes the loudest battles are the ones fought behind closed doors. We'll see you in the next video.